Oh, why hello there, this is the Onioncreature man. Today I'm going to talk about Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, which was recently released on the 3DS. As you can see, I've got my Kirby blanket, I've got my Kirby yarn things, and we're all ready to talk about this video game. So that'll be real swell and real comfortable and real soft and fuzzy, like the game itself.
Having a yarn body is epic, and then some.
So the Wii game that Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn is based on is simply superb. Although I will say that porting it to the 3DS currently is kind of odd, but it does sort of make sense if you consider the kind of games which Nintendo has been releasing on the 3DS, which is largely ports of older titles which are in some way suitable to run on the 3DS. We have Luigi's Mansion, Bowser's Inside Story, Yoshi's Woolly World. They ported the Warriors games for some reason, like they ported Hyrule Warriors and Fire Emblem Warriors, a game where there are hundreds of characters on screen at once. They thought, oh, we should port that to the 3DS. Oh, that's a great idea. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. So it seems like Nintendo is more willing to re-release games on the 3DS, where they don't need to upscale or redesign graphics for HD, like they'd have to for a release on Switch. In fact, Nintendo doesn't really seem to release any HD remasters at all other than Zelda games, and so hopefully we see that changed in the coming years as the 3DS begins to become phased out. As we're starting to see now. I like these 3DS remakes. I think they're all right. I am sure most people would prefer HD remakes of classic games on the Switch. I think that would be a lot more appealing to people. I also do have to mention that the timing of Extra Epic Yarn's release is kind of odd because it's being released in the same month as Yoshi's Crafted World, which is another good feel game which is themed around like craft related objects. So I don't know why they did that, and I'm kind of thinking that Epic Yarn's sales might suffer as a result, but hey, who knows? I'm not an expert on that front. Either way, that was a little bit of an odd choice on Nintendo's part, but I suppose now we ought to talk about the game itself. Well, yeah, that's what we're here for, so might as well, right? Yeah. While Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn has a few additions, the base game is largely the same as it was back in 2010. The new additions are at times neat, though others left me feeling bemused and conflicted. I'll go over how these new additions affect the game as a whole soon, but first I'd like to touch on the game itself as a whole, sort of an all-encompassing overview. Visually, the original Wii game has transitioned beautifully to the 3DS. While the lower resolution does retract slightly from the game's look, the style remains intact and movement is still incredibly fluid. It is not an upgrade from the original certainly, but it does hold its own in the visuals department. This game is so colorful and full of details, it's a wonder to behold even on the comparatively tiny 3DS screen, that tiny screen. But still looks good, still looks epic. The way the game plays is just great. Kirby has a really distinct feel and the level design is pristinely crafted around it. The yarn aesthetic is used to great effect. Virtually all of the game's mechanics tie into the theme. Everything in Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn is designed to be as cute and cushy as possible. It's incredibly different to any other Kirby game, and it's simply a treat to play. All of that was of course true of the original game, but the 3DS does have a few additions which change things up a bit. First, I'll talk about the two new mini-games. DDD Go 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 is an auto-running game, which I found to be quite a lot of fun, while Meta Knight's Slash and Bead is a side-scrolling beat-em-up, which is also a ton of fun. The goal of both is to collect as many beads and defeat as many enemies as possible. I found both modes to be a fun little diversion. They're about in line with what we've seen from other Kirby games in the way of side modes, but still good time. Still good time. Both modes have a ranking system, and there's a good deal of enjoyment to be had in trying to perfect your performance in a level to get an S rank. One detail I really liked about the sub-games is that the currency you collect can be used to fill out these adorable little bead creation things, so there's an incentive to replay levels aside from just getting a better rank. I also really liked the way in which the levels in the minigame are unlocked. When you start the game, only one level in each of the sub-games is unlocked, and as you complete further levels in the main game, more levels are unlocked in the sub-games, which provides a nice change of pace from the story mode. This made it so I was revisiting the modes throughout my playthrough, and it allowed me to savor the minigames a bit more. The sub-games in Extra Epic Yarn are far from revolutionary, but they certainly are a nice, fun addition. The most prevalent of the changes in the main game itself are the Ravel abilities. Ravel abilities have been added to essentially every level in the game and can be grabbed out of the hands of unsuspecting waddle-dees. There are 6 Ravel abilities in total, all of which allow for alternative ways to defeat enemies or destroy obstacles. The impact of the Ravel abilities is honestly quite drastic. There is basically no incentive to use Kirby in his base form at any point, so that does make this game quite a bit different from the first one, in that you're not really using Yarn Kirby himself at all. You're using these Ravel abilities. Unfortunately, the Ravel abilities do unbalance the game's difficulty quite a bit. It's evident at a few points that parts of the game simply weren't designed with them in mind. For one, blocks which previously would have required some light puzzle solving and planning can now be completely negated with the use of a Ravel ability. Enemies are by and large far less of a threat and require far less thought to avoid and destroy than in the original. Most egregiously, some bosses are honestly just broken in Extra Epic Yarn. I took out Hot Wings, the second boss of the game, within about 30 seconds using a Ravel ability. Like, that really happened. It was like, you use the Ravel ability and you take them out in 30 seconds. It's a little ridiculous. It's not great. There's also the point that not all Ravel abilities are equally powerful. One of which, the pin cushion, is borderline useless compared to the others. Like, you use the thing, it's like I go back to the other one. This is not it. It's a shame that the implementation of the Ravel abilities is so haphazard, as they are actually a lot of fun to use. I'm a big fan, but they do unbalance the game in quite a few instances. They offer a great deal of variety to the gameplay, so while they do make the game easier, they are still really satisfying and enjoyable on a basic level. The Ravel abilities are a huge part of what makes Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn so extra epic. I just wish their implementation was more well balanced. The second most major addition to Extra Epic Yarn is Devilish mode. The Devilish mode is an option available in every stage in the game, and is essentially a hard mode. The mode adds a life meter and a collection of 3 devil characters who appear from time to time and attempt to deplete Kirby's newfound health points. I have pretty mixed feelings on the Devilish mode. For one, when a devil appears, it will interrupt the music and replace it with a fairly repetitive and at times grating piano tune, which continues until the devil is defeated and retreats. This pretty quickly becomes deeply obnoxious, as a pretty big part of the Epic Yarn experience is being able to listen to the simply phenomenal music, and the Devilish mode's musical interruptions are really not appreciated. Get him out of here. There's even a pretty obvious solution which is presented in the boss battles, where devils still do appear, but stop playing their song after the introductory jingle has concluded and allow the boss music to continue after that. You are out of luck in the rest of the game, where the devilish music will continue to be an annoyance throughout. I will say that I did eventually get used to the music and learned to sort of ignore it. Another thing about the devils is that their inclusion, like the Ravel abilities, is pretty unbalanced. The 3 types of devils, me devil, we devil, and ye devil, yes, that's real, all attack Kirby in different ways, and depending on the level, they can be laughably easy to dispatch or obnoxiously difficult to get rid of. The Ravel abilities are pretty clearly designed to be used alongside Devilish mode, and it's where they're the most useful. Some of the abilities, such as wire or nylon, can get rid of devils immediately. This also does fortunately negate some of the annoyance of the devilish music, since you can stop it immediately after it starts in a great number of levels. However, using Kirby in his base form is just not really advisable in devilish mode. Kirby needs to find an enemy, pick it up, and then find the right timing to hurl it at the devil and send it on its way. Otherwise, you're stuck listening to the music, and Kirby is similarly helpless during a fair few of the transformation levels, such as the race car or penguin levels, where the devil is pretty difficult to get rid of, and by extension, these levels are substantially harder than the normal levels, where use of the Ravel abilities is an option. During normal gameplay, the easiness of the Ravel abilities is sort of balanced out by the devilish mode, as the addition of the devils and the health meter does make the game legitimately harder. I really did enjoy the tension that being able to actually die had on the game. I died on a fair few occasions, and it's pretty unfortunate because there's no real checkpoint system in place, so you have to restart the level every time you die, and that feels a little harsh. That being said, having to replay levels is made a lot easier by using the Ravel abilities, since you can blast through a level far more quickly than if you were just using normal Yarn Kirby. Another helpful presence is Prince Fluff, who appears at roughly the midway point of each level to provide Kirby with a health replenishing star, which does itself act like a bit of a checkpoint. Prince Fluff's help is appreciated, as there is an incentive to finish every level without taking damage. Overall though, the Devilish mode and Ravel abilities do muddle the game's difficulty quite a bit. I'd say that the original 2010 release was incredibly well balanced in terms of difficulty, But I'm not sure I can say the same about Extra Epic Yarn. Playing the normal mode using the Ravel abilities is probably a bit too easy, though it is still fun. While the difficulty provided by Devilish mode can range from a minor distraction to a huge obstacle depending on the level, so it just kind of fluctuates. Another added wrinkle is the Amiibo support, which allows Kirby to gain an ability whenever you want by scanning any Kirby series Amiibo. There's no limit on the amount of times which you can scan an Amiibo, so this too ends up feeling a bit overpowered. Though I did enjoy the fun hats that it gives Kirby. In the original Epic Yarn, the only two conditions for 100%ing a level were to get a gold medal and collect all the furniture and music discs. The new Devilish mode provides a third victory condition, being completing levels without taking damage. You can gain life points, of which there are 250 in total, by beating a level with a full health bar, which can earn you some legitimately cool furniture for Kirby's pad, which I must say is a lot easier to use and even has more options than Extra Epic Yarn. Like you get 3 different rooms which you can decorate, which is pretty nice. That's a nice improvement. I like that. And the touchscreen support in Kirby's pad works really well. Most of the items you can get through Devilish mode are interactive and are actually a lot of fun to mess around with. And it provides much more of an incentive to play through levels than existed in the original. The biggest omission in the transition from 3DS to Wii is the multiplayer. Epic Yarn's multiplayer was a lot of fun, so it's too bad to see it cut from the 3DS port. It's just a shame that Prince Fluff can't travel along with you. That's really too bad. Like, he shows up in the midway point to give you a star, and that's really cool that they put that in each level, and you get to see him, you get to say hello, Prince Fluff, but you can't play along with him. That's too bad. Gotta play the Wii version for that. Oh well. That being said, the game isn't ruined. It's still obviously a lot of fun in single player, but it is a notable omission nonetheless. I'll miss you, Fluff. Good night, sweet prince. 2010 to 2010. I did really enjoy being able to play Epic Yarn on a handheld console. It's a good fit, and the replay value added by the Devilish mode works really well for the more pick up and play format. It's also pretty odd how the developers chose not to really use the touchscreen of the 3DS for any of the transformation segments, particularly the train transformation, say that 10 times fast, where you use the thumbstick to somewhat awkwardly draw tracks as opposed to just drawing them with the touchscreen, which, you know, you'd think you'd be able to do. I mean, it works without the touchscreen. It's just kind of weird that they didn't really use it for any of those. I don't know why. Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn also lacks any 3D functionality, which is a real shame, since I'm sure it would have looked even better than it does, which it already looks great. And it could have given the game a more distinct identity from the Wii version. Street Pass is also included, but I don't really use Street Pass at this point in time, so I wasn't really able to get anything out of that. The functionality is basically you can share the room you made via Street Pass, and I think that's cool. I just don't know how many people are actually actively using Street Pass currently. I'm certainly not. Looking at Kirby's Extra Epic Yarn, it's pretty clear that a fair deal of effort was put into this port. The game still looks amazing, and the new additions are pretty widespread. However, the direction the developers took with some of these additions is at times questionable. I do kind of think that simply adding a difficulty meter would have been enough of a change, as the devils do really become overbearing a lot of the time. There's also the Ravel abilities, which are about as fun as they are unbalanced. I think I would have liked to see the abilities in Extra Epic Yarn be a bit more thoughtfully implemented, as in its current form, they do make the difficulty level a lot more uneven than it should be, and a lot more uneven than it originally was on the Wii. It is still an excellent game, however, and even as someone who has played Epic Yarn before, I still had a wonderful time. And though Devilish mode and the Ravel abilities weren't perfectly implemented, they did make the experience feel pretty fresh. This is doubly true for the new sub-games, which I think are simply great. Those are a lot of fun. I like those a lot. As much as I've praised Extra Epic Yarn, I can't really say that it's the definitive version of the game. The Wii version not only looks a little better visually, it has a more refined gameplay experience than Extra Epic Yarn. There's also the factor of co-op, which the 3DS version simply can't provide. I'm going to talk a little bit about price, because it's sort of relevant. In terms of price, the Wii version does come out on top, since it can be downloaded on the Wii U eShop for just $20, half that of Extra Epic Yarn. Although granted, Extra Epic Yarn is a new release, which tend to cost more in general. And you know, price is sort of one of the more subjective things about a game, so I don't think that's the deciding factor in which version you would get if you were wanting to buy one of them. I'd likely recommend the original game over Extra Epic Yarn in most cases, but that doesn't mean Extra Epic Yarn is a lost cause. The new content is largely really fun, and though it isn't perfect, I did have a great time with it. The issue is that the Wii game is simply better on a whole, even though the extra content provided in the 3DS version does have its own merit. I would recommend this game to 3 distinct groups of people. Fans of the original game who want to replay the game in a fresh and new way. People who don't own a Wii or Wii U but do own a 3DS definitely should pick it up in that case. That's you. And also people with a debilitating obsession with Kirby games. I wonder who that might be. If you don't fall into any of those 3 categories, you should probably be okay just sticking with the Wii version. That'll probably get the job done. The portability, increased replay value, fun minigames, new furniture, and interesting new abilities provided by the 3DS version does offer quite a lot of fun content that the original doesn't have, but the muddled difficulty and lack of co-op do make it a bit less of a compelling product on a whole, even if I do still consider Extra Epic Yarn to be a fantastic game. Well, that's enough Kirby for one day. Talk to you later!